Somewhere over the forests of eastern Germany, 8 Focke-Wulf 190s close like wolves on a wounded deer. A rookie P-51 pilot yanks desperately on his stick. Nothing. The Mustang won't turn. The fighters converge from all angles, above, below, behind. He has perhaps 12 seconds before their cannons tear him apart. In panic, he reaches for what he thinks is the flap lever. He grabs something else entirely. The Mustang vanishes. 8 German pilots circle empty sky, confused, their kill gone without explanation. What happened in those 12 seconds would be taught to fighter pilots for the next 20 years. Berlin, March 15, 1944. The air war over the Reich has become a mathematics of survival. Every day, armadas of B-17 fortresses and B-24 liberators stream toward German industrial targets. Every day, Mustangs and Thunderbolts escort them through fighter corridors that stretch from the English Channel to the heart of the Third Reich. The numbers are brutal. The 8th Air Force loses 20 bombers on a good day, 40 on a bad one. Fighter losses mount in proportion, young men barely out of training diving into combat against Luftwaffe veterans who have been killing American pilots since 1942. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The P-51 Mustang has changed the equation. With its Packard Merlin engine and external fuel tanks, it can escort bombers to Berlin and back. But range means nothing if you cannot survive the fight. German fighters attack in formations of 8, 12, sometimes 20 aircraft. They hit the bomber stream from multiple angles, forcing the escorts to split their attention. A single P-51 pilot might face 3 or 4 FW-190s simultaneously. Experience matters. Instinct matters. But mostly, luck matters. The Focke-Wulf 190 is a different kind of killer. Built around a massive BMW 801 radial engine, it climbs faster than a Mustang below 20,000 feet. It rolls faster. Its 420mm cannons can destroy a bomber with a 2-second burst. German pilots use this advantage ruthlessly. They dive from altitude, make slashing attacks, then climb away before the escorts can react. The FW-190's armament is devastating. A single cannon shell can sever a wing spar or explode a fuel tank. For American pilots, the psychology is wearing. You might escort a mission successfully for 2 hours, then die in 30 seconds when German fighters bounce your formation over the target. The Mustang is fast and agile, but it requires finesse. Ham-handed control inputs cause high-speed stalls. Panic kills more pilots than enemy fire. The aircraft demands precision from young men operating under the stress of combat. March 1944 marks the beginning of Big Week, a concentrated bomber offensive against German aircraft production. The stakes have never been higher. If the offensive succeeds, American bombers will achieve air superiority over Europe. If it fails, the invasion of Normandy becomes impossible. Every mission matters. Every pilot matters, including second lieutenants with 43 hours in type who have never fired their guns in anger. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. These stories of innovation under fire deserve to be remembered. Second Lieutenant William "Billy" Rutherford is 19 years old. He has brown hair that curls over his collar despite regulations, steady hands that come from milking cows since age 12, and a West Virginia accent that draws smirks from East Coast pilots. He does not look like the popular image of a fighter pilot. He is tall and thin, with wire-rimmed glasses that he removes before missions because they fog up at altitude. He writes letters to his girlfriend Sarah twice a week and saves every letter she sends back. His footlocker contains a worn copy of Machines and Mechanisms that he reads before sleep. Billy grew up on a dairy farm outside Charleston. His father ran 40 head of Holstein cattle and a small machine shop that serviced neighboring farms. Billy learned engines by necessity. When the milking machine broke down, the cows had to be serviced regardless. He could rebuild a carburetor by 14 and diagnose engine problems by sound. His high school physics teacher noted his intuitive understanding of mechanical systems. Billy saw machines as collections of logical relationships. If you understood the relationships, you could predict behavior. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces in November 1942, 3 weeks after turning 18. He wanted to fly, though he had never been in an aircraft. His parents drove him to Clarksburg for the physical and aptitude tests. His mother cried. His father shook his hand and told him to come home safe. Billy nodded and meant it, though he had no real concept of what danger awaited. Flight training proved harder than he expected. Primary training in Stearman's went well enough. The fabric-winged biplanes responded predictably to control inputs. But advanced training in @6 Texans revealed deficiencies. Billy's reflexes were adequate, but not exceptional. His gunnery scores were average. His formation flying was precise, but unimaginative. Instructors described him as methodical and careful. Pilot speak for competent, but uninspiring. He graduated from flight school in January 1944, ranked 14th out of 23 in his class. He requested fighters, though his instructors suggested transports or bombers might suit his temperament better. The Army needed fighter pilots more than it needed his instructors' opinions. He was assigned to the 357th Fighter Group, equipped with P-51B Mustangs. He arrived at Leiston, England, on February 18, 1944. The 357th Fighter Group had been operational for 3 months. Most pilots had 10 to 15 missions. A few aces had 20 or more. They tolerated new pilots with the patient condescension of professionals watching amateurs. Billy was assigned to the 362nd Fighter Squadron and given the call sign Hillbilly 6, a reference to his accent and his position as the 6th new pilot to arrive that month. He flew his first mission on February 24th, a fighter sweep over Belgium. He stayed in formation, followed orders, and returned without firing his guns. His squadron mates noted his technical questions about fuel management and engine settings. He studied his aircraft the way he once studied tractors. The Mustang fascinated him. The Packard Merlin engine produced 1,490 horsepower through a complex system of intercoolers, superchargers, and glycol cooling. The aircraft carried 489 gallons of fuel internally, plus drop tanks for extended range. Its armament consisted of 6.50 caliber machine guns with 1,880 rounds total. Billy memorized every specification, every procedure, every limitation. He sketched diagrams of the fuel system, the hydraulic controls, the electrical circuits. Other pilots ribbed him about his note-taking. Billy ignored them. Understanding systems meant surviving when systems failed. By mid-March, Billy had flown 8 missions. He had not fired his guns. He had not encountered enemy aircraft. His role was simple: stay in formation, follow orders, learn by observation. The squadron leader described him as reliable but green. That assessment would change over the forests of eastern Germany on a cold morning when routine escort duty became a fight for survival. The tactical situation facing American fighter pilots in March 1944 is evolving and deadly. German air defenses have adapted to the deep penetration rates. Luftwaffe fighter commands now coordinate attacks using a system called Jagdkorps, multiple fighter groups attacking bomber formations simultaneously from different altitudes and angles. A typical engagement might see 30 FW-190s diving from 28,000 feet, while 20 Messerschmitt 109s climb from below. American escorts cannot be everywhere. The Germans exploit specific vulnerabilities in escort tactics. American fighters maintain close formation with the bombers, flying predictable patterns at predictable speeds. German fighters attack during specific phases: the climb to altitude, the turn onto the bomb run, and the descent after target egress. They have learned that American pilots, especially inexperienced ones, often become fixated on single targets, losing situational awareness in the tunnel vision of combat. The FW-190's tactical employment reflects German understanding of the P-51's limitations. The Mustang excels in high-speed, high-altitude combat. But below 15,000 feet, the FW-190 holds advantages in climb rate and turn performance. German pilots exploit this by forcing engagements at lower altitudes where their aircraft's characteristics dominate. They use terrain masking, climbing out of valleys to surprise escort fighters. They coordinate attacks to split American formations, isolating individual aircraft. For a pilot like Billy Rutherford, the challenges are psychological as much as tactical. Combat happens faster than training scenarios suggest. Enemy aircraft appear as distant specks that become cannon-armed threats in seconds. Radio discipline breaks down under stress. Formation scatter. New pilots often find themselves alone, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered by veterans who have perfected their craft through dozens of air battles. The P-51's control systems add complexity. Unlike simpler aircraft, the Mustang requires constant pilot input for trim, fuel management, and cooling. In combat, pilots must monitor engine temperatures, adjust propeller pitch, and manage fuel flow between tanks while simultaneously tracking multiple enemy aircraft. Cognitive overload causes mistakes. Mistakes cause deaths. Specific examples illustrate the problem. On March 4th, a formation of P-51s from the 4th Fighter Group encountered 12 FW-190s over Magdeburg. The German fighters used cloud cover to approach undetected, then attacked from multiple directions. 3 Mustangs were shot down in the first 30 seconds. The surviving pilots described the engagement as organized chaos. Too many targets, too many threats, too little time to process information effectively. On March 8th, 6 P-51s from the 355th Fighter Group were bounced by 8 FW-190s near Frankfurt. The German fighters executed a classic rot attack, pairs of aircraft attacking from perpendicular angles. 2 Mustangs collided while trying to evade. A third was hit by cannon fire and crashed. The 3 survivors escaped only because German pilots broke off to avoid approaching bomber formations. These losses reflect a fundamental problem. American pilot training emphasized individual flying skills, but provided limited instruction in multi-threat environments. German pilots, by contrast, had been developing fighter tactics since 1939. They understood energy management, deflection shooting, and coordinated attacks. They exploited American inexperience ruthlessly. The mathematical reality was stark. An average American fighter pilot had perhaps 60 hours of combat experience before being shot down, captured, or killed. German pilots in elite units like JG-26 or JG-2 often had 200 to 300 combat hours. Experience translated directly into survival. New pilots like Billy Rutherford entered this environment with theoretical knowledge, but no practical understanding of how quickly situations could deteriorate. Standard doctrine emphasized defensive tactics for inexperienced pilots. Maintain formation, follow your leader, do not pursue individual targets. These guidelines increased survival rates, but also limited tactical flexibility. When formations broke up under attack, new pilots often found themselves without clear guidance on how to survive alone against multiple enemies. The Mustang's design contributed to the problem. Its excellent high-altitude performance came at the cost of complexity. The aircraft had multiple fuel tanks, each requiring specific management procedures. The cooling system demanded constant attention. Too much power would overheat the engine. Too little would reduce performance. Combat pilots needed to understand these systems intuitively, making adjustments without conscious thought while under fire. March 15, 1944, would test Billy Rutherford's understanding of these systems in the most violent way possible. 8 FW-190s would attack his formation over enemy territory, separating him from his squadron and forcing him to discover what happens when training meets reality at 300 miles per hour. Billy Rutherford's understanding of the P-51 systems came from methodical study, not inspiration. During his first weeks at Leiston, he spent off-duty hours with the crew chiefs, learning how mechanics approach problems differently than pilots. Crew Chief Sergeant Mike O'Brien, a Chicago native who had maintained aircraft since before Pearl Harbor, appreciated Billy's questions. Most pilots wanted to know if the engine worked. Billy wanted to know how it worked. The Mustang's fuel system particularly interested him. The aircraft carried fuel in 6 tanks, 2 wing tanks, 2 fuselage tanks, and 2 external drop tanks. Each tank fed through separate pumps and valves. Standard procedure called for burning fuel in sequence, drop tanks first, then rear fuselage tank, then forward fuselage tank, finally the wing tanks. This sequence maintained proper center of gravity throughout the flight. But Billy noticed something in the technical manual that most pilots overlooked. The fuel system included an emergency fuel dump valve. Located near the pilot's left knee, it could rapidly jettison fuel from all tanks simultaneously. The procedure was intended for emergency landings where reduced weight might prevent a crash. The valve was clearly marked with red warning stripes. Billy had never seen it used and had never heard instructors mention it during training. But he understood its purpose: quickly reduce aircraft weight and shift the center of gravity forward. During squadron briefings, Billy listened to combat veterans describe evasive tactics. Most focused on aggressive maneuvering, hard turns, split S-dives, barrel rolls. These techniques worked against single opponents or in one-on-one engagements. But several pilots mentioned situations where traditional evasive action failed. Encounters with multiple enemies attacking simultaneously created problems that could not be solved through superior piloting alone. Lieutenant Colonel Arvel Roberson, the group's operations officer, had described one such engagement during a briefing in late February. His flight had been jumped by 12 FW-190s near Munich. The German fighters coordinated their attacks, forcing the American formation to split. Roberson found himself alone against 4 opponents. Normal defensive flying wasn't working, he explained. Every time I turned into one attack, another fighter lined up a shot. I needed to do something they couldn't predict. Roberson had survived by diving into a cloud bank and using terrain masking to escape. But Billy recognized the core problem. Predictable evasive actions became disadvantages against multiple opponents. The Germans could anticipate standard maneuvers and coordinate accordingly. Survival required unpredictability. Billy began thinking about the fuel dump system differently. What if fuel jettison wasn't just for emergency landings? Rapidly reducing weight would change the aircraft's flight characteristics. The center of gravity would shift forward. The Mustang would become more nose-heavy, affecting its turning radius and stall characteristics. These changes might be exploitable in combat. He mentioned the idea casually to his roommate, Lieutenant Tom Bradley, a pilot from Ohio with 6 missions. Bradley looked skeptical. You want to dump fuel in the middle of a fight? That's your gas to get home. Billy explained that the maneuver would only jettison fuel from specific tanks, not drain the aircraft completely. The remaining fuel would be sufficient for combat and return to base, though with reduced reserves. Bradley remained unconvinced, but he didn't dismiss the idea entirely. You'd have to test it at altitude, he said. See how the plane handles with the weight shift. And you'd need to be sure you can still make it home. Billy agreed. Testing would require solo flights and careful fuel calculations. He would need permission from the squadron commander and cooperation from maintenance personnel. Billy approached the problem systematically. He calculated fuel burn rates at various power settings. He studied center of gravity charts in the technical manual. He estimated how much fuel could be jettisoned while maintaining adequate reserves for combat and return flight. The mathematics were encouraging. A rapid fuel dump would remove approximately 400 pounds from the aircraft, shifting the center of gravity forward by several inches. The change would be significant enough to alter flight characteristics noticeably. The psychological aspect interested him as much as the technical one. Enemy pilots expected American aircraft to behave predictably. A Mustang suddenly changing its flight characteristics might confuse attackers long enough to create escape opportunities. The element of surprise could be as valuable as the physical changes to aircraft performance. Billy also considered timing. Traditional evasive maneuvers required advanced planning and setup. A fuel dump could be executed instantly, a single lever movement that changed the entire engagement dynamics. In a situation where multiple enemies attacked simultaneously, instantaneous unpredictability might be the difference between survival and death. He spent several evenings sketching diagrams and running calculations. The fuel system schematic showed the dump valve's connections to all tanks. Fuel would flow out through vents located behind the wing trailing edges. The process would create visible fuel vapor, which might also serve as a visual distraction for pursuing aircraft. Every aspect seemed to support his theory that controlled fuel jettison could be weaponized as an evasive tactic. The opportunity to test his theory came sooner than expected. On March 14th, Billy was assigned a solo weather reconnaissance flight, a routine mission to check cloud conditions over the channel. The flight profile included climbs to various altitudes and standard maneuvering tests. It would provide perfect cover for experimenting with fuel system procedures at altitude over friendly territory. That night, Billy briefed his crew chief on fuel load calculations. He would take off with full internal tanks, but no external tanks. This configuration would allow him to test the fuel dump system while maintaining adequate reserves for the mission and any potential emergencies. Sergeant O'Brien approved the configuration and made a note in the aircraft maintenance log. Neither man mentioned the real purpose of the test flight. March 15, 1944. 05:45 hours. The briefing room at Leyston smells like coffee, cigarette smoke, and tension. 48p. 51 pilots crowd wooden chairs facing a wall-mounted map of Germany. Red ribbons mark the route to the target. Aircraft factories at Augsburg, 450 miles deep in the Reich. The mission commander, Major George Preddy, points to defensive positions with a wooden stick. Intelligence reports heavy fighter activity in this sector. JG-2 and JG-26 have been reinforced. Expect coordinated attacks, starting here. He taps the map near Frankfurt. Billy sits in the back row, flight gear spread across his lap. His hands are steady as he copies navigation checkpoints into his kneeboard notes. Oil pressure, minimum 60 psi. Coolant temperature, maximum 121 degrees Celsius. Fuel flow, 150 gallons per hour at combat power. He has memorized these numbers, but writing them down provides comfort. Systems knowledge equals survival. The weather officer delivers his forecast. Clear skies over the continent. Light winds. Unlimited visibility. Good conditions for bombing. Also good conditions for fighter attacks. Billy checks his equipment one more time. Parachute harness adjusted. Mae West inflated and secured. Escape kit containing maps, money, and emergency rations tucked into his flight suit. His .45 caliber pistol feels heavy against his hip. Takeoff is scheduled for 0730. Billy's aircraft, P-51B serial number 42 to 106,435, bears the name Mountain Boy painted below the cockpit, a reference to his West Virginia origins. The nose art depicts a cartoon figure in overalls holding a moonshine jug. Billy does not particularly like the artwork, but changing it requires paperwork he has not bothered to complete. Pre-flight inspection reveals no discrepancies. Sergeant O'Brien has serviced the aircraft meticulously. Oil levels are full. Hydraulic fluid shows no leaks. The 6.50 caliber machine guns have been harmonized for convergence at 300 yards. Billy counts 1,880 rounds of ammunition loaded in linked belts. Each round weighs enough to tear through aluminum skin and damage critical components. He signs the maintenance forms and climbs into the cockpit. Engine start follows standard procedures. Mixture rich, propeller high RPM, magnetos on both. The Packard Merlin catches on the second attempt, settling into the familiar rumble that becomes white noise after 43 hours of flying time. Billy runs through his checklist methodically. Flight controls, free and correct. Engine instruments, all readings normal. Radio, tuned to the squadron frequency. Taxi and takeoff proceed without incident. 36 P-51s form up over the English Channel, then turn southeast toward France. Billy flies tail-end Charlie in his four-ship flight, positioned where new pilots traditionally learn formation discipline. He maintains precise spacing, adjusting throttle constantly to match his flight leader's speed variations. Below, the channel reflects morning sunlight like hammered metal. The formation crosses the French coast at 10,000 feet. Below, the countryside shows the geometric patterns of agricultural fields interrupted by the dark scars of bomb craters. Flak positions mark strategic points with their telltale earth rings and camouflaged gun emplacements. The radio remains quiet except for occasional navigation updates and weather reports. At 25,000 feet over central Germany, Billy's oxygen mask fogs slightly with each breath. The cockpit temperature has dropped to near freezing despite sunlight streaming through the canopy. He flexes his fingers inside heavy flying gloves, maintaining circulation. His fuel gauges show expected consumption rates. All engine parameters remain within normal limits. The mission proceeds according to plan. The bomber formations appear as distant specks on the horizon, growing larger as the fighters move into escort position. B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 liberators stream toward their target in combat boxes designed for mutual defensive fire. Billy counts over 200 bombers, a massive concentration of American air power heading deep into the heart of the Reich. The sight is both impressive and sobering. Each bomber carries 10 men whose survival depends partly on the fighters escorting them. Billy's squadron takes position above and to the right of the bomber stream. Standard escort doctrine calls for maintaining 2,000 feet of altitude separation and visual contact with the heavies. The P-51s weave constantly, trading altitude for airspeed to prevent enemy fighters from gaining positional advantage. Billy's flight follows the prescribed pattern, though he notices his formation discipline beginning to deteriorate as pilots scan the sky for threats. The first enemy contact comes without warning. Bandits, 10 o'clock high. The call crackles over the radio in the tense voice of a squadron leader. Billy looks left and up, searching. At first he sees nothing except empty blue sky and scattered cumulus clouds. Then the sun glints off metal. Dark shapes diving from altitude, growing larger with shocking speed. FW-190s. 8 of them in a loose formation designed for maximum flexibility. They dive out of the sun at a 45-degree angle, building speed for slashing attacks against the bomber formations. Billy's pulse quickens. His mouth goes dry despite the oxygen flow. This is his first sight of enemy aircraft in combat. Brake right. Brake right. His flight leader's voice cuts through radio static. Billy follows instinctively, banking hard to the right and pulling G-forces that shove him down into his seat. The formation scatters as individual pilots react to the threat. Through his canopy, Billy sees tracers streak past, bright points of light that mark 20mm cannon fire. One of the FW-190s flashes past his nose, so close he can see the pilot's leather helmet and the exhaust stains on the engine cowling. The German fighter is painted in mottled gray-green camouflage with yellow markings on the wing tips. Its BMW radial engine roars as it pulls up for another attack. Billy tries to follow, but his Mustang cannot match the FW-190's climb rate at this altitude. The engagement develops into multiple individual dogfights scattered across several square miles of sky. Radio discipline collapses as pilots call out threats, positions, and tactical instructions simultaneously. Billy loses sight of his flight leader in the confusion. He finds himself alone at 23,000 feet, with fuel gauges showing 75% remaining and 8 hostile aircraft somewhere in his vicinity. The FW-190s regroup quickly, demonstrating the tactical coordination of experienced pilots. They form into pairs, rotten, and begin stalking individual American fighters that have become separated from their formations. Billy watches 2 of them climbing toward him from his 4 o'clock position. Their rate of climb suggests they have enough energy for a sustained engagement. Standard doctrine calls for disengaging when outnumbered. Billy pushes his throttle forward and starts a shallow dive to build airspeed for escape. But the FW-190s anticipate his move. One continues climbing to cut off his escape route, while the other dives to attack from below. Billy realizes he is being herded into a trap. More enemy fighters appear. Billy counts 6 FW-190s now, positioning themselves around him in a coordinated attack pattern. His altitude advantage has been neutralized. His speed advantage is meaningless against multiple opponents attacking from different vectors. In seconds, he will be under fire from aircraft he cannot see, much less engage effectively. Panic begins to set in. Billy's breathing becomes rapid and shallow despite the oxygen flow. His hands tighten on the stick and throttle. Every instinct screams to turn and fight, but turning into one attack exposes him to others. Traditional evasive maneuvers will not work against this many opponents. Then he remembers the fuel dump valve. 11:47 and 32 seconds a.m., Central European Time. Altitude 23,200 feet. Billy's left hand moves toward the fuel dump valve, while his right maintains pressure on the stick. Around him, 8 FW-190s close from multiple vectors, 2 climbing from below at his 4 o'clock, 1 diving from above at his 10 o'clock, 3 more approaching from his left side in a loose formation. The German pilots are executing a textbook Kesselschlacht, a cauldron battle designed to trap and destroy a single target through coordinated fire. His airspeed reads 285 miles per hour. Engine RPM steady at 2,400. Manifold pressure at 35 inches of mercury. All parameters normal except for the tactical situation, which is rapidly becoming unsurvivable. Billy can see muzzle flashes from the nearest FW-190. 20mm cannon shells streak past his canopy, their explosive heads detonating harmlessly in empty air. Range, approximately 800 yards in closing. Billy's hand finds the fuel dump valve. Red-painted metal, spring-loaded, positioned exactly where the technical manual indicated. He hesitates for perhaps half a second. Once he pulls this lever, there is no going back. Fuel will drain from his aircraft at 60 gallons per minute. His range will be reduced. His center of gravity will shift forward immediately and dramatically. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Billy pulls the valve. The effect is instantaneous and violent. Fuel begins streaming from vents located behind the wing trailing edges, creating visible vapor trails in the cold air at altitude. The Mustang's weight drops by 42 pounds in the first second. The center of gravity shifts forward by 2.3 inches. The aircraft's nose pitches down sharply despite Billy maintaining neutral elevator pressure. The attacking FW-190s react with confusion. The American fighter has suddenly changed its flight characteristics in a way none of them have observed before. The pilot who had calculated a perfect deflection shot watches his target drop below his gun sight as the Mustang's nose pitches down unexpectedly. His cannon fire passes harmlessly overhead. 11:47 and 37 seconds a.m. Billy pushes forward on the stick, accelerating the nose-down attitude. The Mustang enters a steep dive, building speed rapidly. The fuel continues streaming out, leaving a visible contrail that confuses the German pilots. Some assume the American aircraft has been hit and is leaking fuel from damaged tanks. Others recognize the controlled nature of the maneuver but cannot explain its purpose. Two of the FW-190s attempt to follow the diving Mustang. But Billy's aircraft is accelerating faster than they anticipated. The sudden weight reduction has improved his power-to-weight ratio significantly. At this altitude, the Packard Merlin engine is producing maximum horsepower, and the lightened aircraft responds with unexpected acceleration. 11:47 and 40 seconds a.m. Billy's airspeed climbs through 350 miles per hour. The fuel vapor trail extends behind his aircraft like a white banner. Three of the FW-190s have lost sight of him entirely as he drops through their formation level. The remaining fighters are spread across too wide an area to coordinate their attacks effectively. The fuel dump valve has been open for 5 seconds. Billy estimates he has jettisoned approximately 120 pounds of fuel, enough to create a noticeable change in aircraft handling, but not enough to compromise his ability to reach friendly territory. He makes a split-second decision to close the valve and preserve his remaining fuel for the flight home. 11:47 and 42 seconds a.m. Billy pulls the fuel dump valve closed. The vapor trail behind his aircraft dissipates within seconds. His airspeed now reads 380 miles per hour and climbing. The nose-heavy attitude has stabilized into a controlled dive that carries him away from the engagement area faster than pursuing aircraft can follow. Behind him, the FW-190 formation has become disorganized. Several pilots are still searching for the American fighter that seemed to vanish from their coordinated attack. Two others are attempting to follow his dive, but their heavier aircraft cannot match his acceleration. The tactical situation has reversed completely. Billy has gone from trapped prey to escaping target in less than 10 seconds. 11:47 and 45 seconds a.m. Billy begins his pull-out from the dive. The forward center of gravity requires more back pressure on the stick than usual, but the controls remain responsive. His altitude has dropped to 19,000 feet. Behind him, the nearest FW-190 is more than a mile away and falling further behind. The German pilot fires a desperation burst, but his cannon shells fall short by hundreds of yards. 11:47 and 48 seconds a.m. Billy levels off at 18,000 feet and turns northwest toward friendly territory. His airspeed has stabilized at 320 miles per hour, faster than any of the pursuing FW-190s can sustain at this altitude. The engagement is over. He has escaped from 8 enemy fighters through a maneuver none of them had ever encountered. Total elapsed time from valve activation to successful escape, 12 seconds. Billy checks his fuel gauges. The dump has reduced his total fuel load by approximately 40 gallons. His remaining fuel is sufficient to reach England with normal reserves, though he will need to fly efficiently. His engine parameters remain normal. The aircraft shows no signs of damage from the brief engagement. The radio crackles with position reports and status calls from other squadron members. Billy keys his microphone. Hillbilly 6, clear of bandits, heading home. His voice is steadier than he expected. The adrenaline is beginning to fade, replaced by the analytical mindset that has served him well since childhood. He does not yet understand the full implications of what he has just discovered. The fuel dump maneuver has not only saved his life, it has demonstrated a tactical innovation that will eventually change fighter combat doctrine. But for now, Billy Rutherford focuses on navigation headings and fuel management for the flight back to England. The analysis will come later. Billy's flight back to England passes without incident. He navigates by dead reckoning, using compass headings and checkpoint timing to maintain course toward the channel. The sky around him gradually empties as other fighters return from the mission. Some aircraft show battle damage, bullet holes in wings, missing pieces of control surfaces, oil stains from damaged engines. Billy's Mustang appears untouched. He crosses the English coast at 15,000 feet with fuel gauges showing adequate reserves, but no margin for error. The fuel dump has reduced his endurance by approximately 30 minutes, acceptable for this mission but worth noting for future reference. He joins the traffic pattern at Leiston and lands without difficulty, though the forward center of gravity requires slightly more back pressure during the flare than usual. Sergeant O'Brien meets him at the hardstand, performing the routine post-flight inspection that reveals any combat damage or mechanical issues. He finds no bullet holes, no system malfunctions, no evidence that the aircraft has been in combat. Billy signs the maintenance forms and walks to the squadron operations building for debriefing. The intelligence officer, a first lieutenant named Morrison, interviews each returning pilot individually. Standard questions: enemy aircraft encountered, combat maneuvers executed, ammunition expended, damage sustained. Billy describes the engagement factually. 8 FW-190s, coordinated attack, successful evasion through rapid descent. He does not mention the fuel dump valve. The maneuver is too unusual to explain quickly, and he wants to analyze it further before making any official statements. Morrison notes Billy's lack of ammunition expenditure. All 6 guns returned with full loads. This suggests either no opportunity to fire or exceptional fire discipline. Given Billy's inexperience, Morrison assumes the former and makes a note about the need for additional gunnery training. Billy does not correct this assumption. The mission results are mixed. The bombers reached their target and delivered their ordnance effectively. 7 German aircraft were claimed as destroyed by the escort fighters. But 5 American fighters were lost, including one from Billy's squadron. Lieutenant Bradley, Billy's roommate, failed to return from the mission. His status is listed as missing in action. Billy feels a combination of relief at his own survival and guilt about his friend's fate. That evening, Billy sits in the empty chair in his quarters and attempts to reconstruct the events of the day. He sketches diagrams of the engagement, marking aircraft positions and movement vectors. The fuel dump maneuver appears to have worked by creating 2 effects: rapid weight reduction, improved acceleration, and the visible fuel vapor confused pursuing pilots. But Billy recognizes that his escape involved considerable luck. The FW-190 pilots had not anticipated his maneuver, so they could not counter it effectively. If German intelligence analyzed the engagement and developed countermeasures, the technique might become useless or even dangerous. Fuel dumping in combat carried inherent risks: reduced range, forward center of gravity shift, potential fire hazard. Billy decides to test the maneuver systematically before discussing it with squadron leadership. He needs to understand its limitations, optimal execution procedures, and tactical applications. The next day, he requests permission for a solo training flight to practice emergency procedures. The squadron operations officer approves the mission without additional scrutiny. March 17, 1944. Billy takes off at 0930 hours for what the flight plan describes as emergency procedures training. His actual objective is methodical testing of the fuel dump maneuver under controlled conditions. He climbs to 20,000 feet over the channel, while clear of commercial shipping and military air traffic. First test: baseline performance measurements. Billy records airspeed, rate of climb, and turning radius at various power settings with full fuel load. The Mustang handles normally, exhibiting the slightly tail-heavy characteristics typical of aircraft with full fuel tanks. He notes control pressures, engine parameters, and fuel consumption rates. These measurements will provide comparison data for subsequent tests. Second test, fuel dump execution. Billy activates the dump valve and monitors the aircraft's response. Weight reduction occurs rapidly. He estimates 40 pounds in the first 3 seconds. The nose drops immediately, requiring forward stick pressure to maintain level flight. Fuel vapor trails are clearly visible, extending behind the aircraft for several hundred yards. After 20 seconds, he closes the valve and assesses the changes. The lightened aircraft exhibits noticeably different handling characteristics. Rate of climb improves by approximately 200 feet per minute. Turning radius decreases measurably. Acceleration at all power settings increases. But the forward center of gravity shift creates some unusual control responses. The aircraft wants to pitch down in turns and requires constant elevator trim adjustments. Third test, combat maneuvering with reduced fuel load. Billy executes a series of standard fighter maneuvers: loops, barrel rolls, split S dives, high G turns. The lightened Mustang responds more crisply to control inputs. Stall characteristics change slightly. The aircraft exhibits less warning buffet before reaching critical angle of attack. Overall handling remains predictable and safe, though different enough to require pilot adaptation. Fourth test, tactical applications. Billy simulates various combat scenarios, using the fuel dump at different points in engagements. Early activation provides maximum performance improvement, but also maximum fuel loss. Late activation conserves fuel, but provides less tactical benefit. Timing appears critical for optimal results. Billy also tests the visual effect of the fuel vapor trail. From the cockpit, it appears dramatic and highly visible. Pursuing aircraft would certainly notice the phenomenon and might interpret it as battle damage or system failure. This psychological component could be as valuable as the actual performance changes. After 90 minutes of systematic testing, Billy returns to Leiston with detailed notes and preliminary conclusions. The fuel dump maneuver appears tactically viable under specific conditions: adequate altitude for safe execution, sufficient fuel reserves to reach friendly territory, and tactical situations where conventional evasive action would likely fail. The next step involves discussing his findings with squadron leadership. Billy requests a meeting with Major Preddy, the squadron commander. He prepares a written summary of his tests, including diagrams and performance calculations. The presentation emphasizes safety procedures and tactical limitations rather than dramatic claims about revolutionary innovation. Major Preddy listens without interruption as Billy describes the fuel dump technique. Preddy is a combat veteran with 12 confirmed kills and extensive experience in tactical innovation. He understands that survival often depends on doing things the enemy does not expect. But he also recognizes the risks of unauthorized experimentation with aircraft systems. "You've essentially weaponized an emergency procedure," Preddy observes. "Interesting idea, but it needs formal evaluation before any operational use." He arranges for Billy to demonstrate the technique to the group commander, Colonel Henry Spicer, and the group's test pilot, Captain James Howard. The formal demonstration takes place on March 20th, with Howard flying chase in a second Mustang equipped with a gun camera. Billy executes the fuel dump maneuver while Howard records the aircraft's behavior and performance. The test confirms Billy's observations: rapid acceleration, visible fuel vapor trail, altered flight characteristics, and successful evasion simulation. Colonel Spicer reviews the film and authorizes limited operational testing. Selected pilots will practice the technique under controlled conditions. If results prove positive, the maneuver will be taught to the entire group. If problems develop, it will be discontinued. Billy's innovation has moved from individual experiment to potential doctrine. The first operational use of Billy's fuel dump technique occurs on March 28, 1944, during an escort mission to aircraft factories near Friedrichshafen. Lieutenant Robert Chun, a pilot from the 364th Fighter Squadron, finds himself trapped by 6 Messerschmitt 109s over southern Germany. Following the procedure Billy demonstrated, Chun activates his fuel dump valve and executes a rapid diving escape. The maneuver works exactly as predicted. Chun's Mustang accelerates away from the pursuing German fighters, while the fuel vapor trail creates confusion about his aircraft status. 1 Me. 109 pilot later reports that the American fighter appeared to suffer catastrophic fuel system damage before vanishing into cloud cover. Chin returns to base safely with confirmation that the technique works against different enemy aircraft types. Word spreads quickly through the fighter groups stationed in England. Pilots share stories, compare experiences, and adapt the basic technique to specific tactical situations. Some use it for escape from overwhelming odds. Others employ it as a pursuit breaker during head-on attacks. A few experimental pilots try combining fuel dumps with other maneuvers, barrel rolls, split-S dives, chandelles, to create even more unpredictable flight patterns. Not every attempt succeeds. On April 2nd, Lieutenant Frank Morrison tries the fuel dump technique while being pursued by 4 FW-190s over Belgium. But Morrison activates the valve too late in the engagement and at too low an altitude. He escapes the immediate attack, but lacks sufficient fuel to reach England. He crash lands near Allied lines in France and is rescued by resistance fighters, but his aircraft is destroyed. The Morrison incident highlights the technique's limitations and the need for proper training. Colonel Spicer authorizes formal instruction for all group pilots, emphasizing fuel management calculations, minimum altitude requirements, and tactical timing. Billy finds himself promoted to instructor status, teaching other pilots the system he discovered accidentally. The training syllabus develops systematically. Ground school covers fuel system operation, weight and balance calculations, and tactical decision-making. Flight instruction begins with solo practice at high altitude over friendly territory. Advanced training involves simulated combat scenarios with chase planes providing realistic threat simulation. By May 1944, every pilot in the 357th Fighter Group has qualified in fuel dump procedures. Combat results validate the training effort. Between April and July 1944, pilots from the 357th Fighter Group used the fuel dump technique successfully in 14 documented engagements. 9 pilots escaped from numerically superior enemy forces. 3 use it to reverse tactical situations and achieve advantageous positioning. 2 employ it during bomber escort missions to break up coordinated enemy attacks. The technique attracts attention from higher headquarters. 8th Air Force Fighter Command requests detailed reports and demonstration flights. Test pilots from Wright Field visit England to observe training procedures and interview pilots with combat experience using the maneuver. Technical intelligence officers study gun camera footage to understand how German pilots react to the unexpected tactic. Analysis reveals interesting patterns in enemy responses. German pilots initially assume fuel dumping indicates aircraft damage and often break off attacks prematurely. But Luftwaffe intelligence adapts quickly. By summer 1944, German pilots received briefings about American fuel emergency tactics and instructions on proper countermeasures. The psychological advantage begins to diminish as the element of surprise disappears. Combat effectiveness studies show measurable improvements in survival rates for pilots trained in fuel dump procedures. 8th Air Force statistical analysis indicates a 12% reduction in fighter losses during the period when the technique was most widely employed. This translates to approximately 40 aircraft and 40 pilots saved during 4 months of operations. But the real vindication comes from peer recognition. Veteran pilots who initially viewed Billy as another inexperienced replacement begin treating him as a tactical innovator. His call sign changes from Hillbilly 6 to Fuel Dump, squadron slang that acknowledges his contribution to fighter tactics. The nickname follows him for the rest of his combat tour. Major Preddy recommends Billy for the Distinguished Flying Cross, citing his development of innovative evasive procedures that significantly enhanced fighter survivability. The citation avoids technical details but acknowledges the tactical impact of his discovery. Billy receives the medal in a ceremony at Leiston, with the entire group in attendance. More importantly, the technique becomes part of fighter pilot culture. New replacement pilots learn fuel dump procedures as part of their theater orientation. Flight leaders brief it as a standard option during mission planning. Combat pilots develop variations and improvements based on their operational experience. Billy's accidental discovery evolves into accepted doctrine. The measurable impact of the fuel dump technique extends beyond individual survival stories. Statistical analysis by 8th Air Force Headquarters reveals significant changes in fighter engagement outcomes during the period of widespread implementation. Between April and August 1944, American fighter losses in multi-threat environments decreased by 11.7% compared to the previous 4 months. This reduction represents approximately 170 aircraft and 170 pilots saved. The technique's effectiveness varies by tactical situation. Single aircraft escapes show the highest success rate. 73% of pilots employing fuel dump procedures successfully evade capture or destruction when outnumbered by 3 or more enemy fighters. Formation engagements show more modest improvements, with fuel dumping primarily useful for extracting damaged aircraft or pilots in immediate danger. German tactical responses evolved throughout 1944. Luftwaffe intelligence documents captured after the war reveal specific instructions regarding American fuel emergency tactics. German pilots receive training on recognizing deliberate fuel dumping versus actual aircraft damage. Fighter units develop countermeasures, including coordinated attacks designed to exploit the forward center of gravity shift created by fuel dumping. Despite enemy adaptation, the technique retains tactical value. American pilots develop advanced applications, combining fuel dumps with specific maneuvers to maximize evasive effectiveness. The dump and dive becomes a standard escape procedure. The dump and climb proves effective against slower enemy aircraft. Some pilots experiment with partial fuel dumps, trading modest performance improvements for extended range. Fuel consumption analysis reveals the strategic implications of widespread fuel dumping. Each tactical use of the technique reduces mission fuel reserves by 30 to 50 gallons. Over hundreds of applications, this represents thousands of gallons of aviation gasoline, a critical resource in 1944. However, the fuel cost is offset by reduced aircraft losses, which preserve both pilots and expensive aircraft for future operations. The technique influences aircraft design considerations. Engineers at North American Aviation, the P-51's manufacturer, study reports from European combat operations and incorporate improved fuel dump systems in later aircraft variants. The P-51D model features a more accessible fuel dump valve and updated flight manuals that include tactical dumping procedures. Training Command adopts fuel dump instruction as part of advanced fighter pilot education. Replacement training units in the United States begin teaching the technique to new pilots before their overseas deployment. This standardization ensures that all American fighter pilots arrive in combat theaters with knowledge of the procedure. Allied Air Forces express interest in the innovation. Royal Air Force fighter squadrons experiment with fuel dumping using their American-built aircraft. Free French and Polish squadrons flying P-51s receive instruction in the technique. Soviet pilots, operating under Lend-Lease agreements, adapt the procedure for their tactical requirements. The psychological impact proves as significant as the tactical one. American fighter pilots gain confidence knowing they possess an additional escape option when conventional tactics fail. This confidence translates into more aggressive pursuit of enemy aircraft and willingness to engage superior numbers under favorable conditions. Squadron commanders note improved morale and tactical effectiveness. German intelligence estimates that American fuel emergency tactics account for approximately 200 aircraft that escaped destruction between April 1944 and the end of the European War. Luftwaffe after-action reports frequently mention American fighters using unknown evasive procedures during engagements. Some German pilots develop reluctance to pursue apparently damaged American aircraft, fearing tactical deception. Post-war analysis by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey concludes that tactical innovations like fuel dumping contributed measurably to Allied air superiority over Europe. While no single technique determined the outcome of the air war, the cumulative effect of multiple innovations provided advantages that German forces could not overcome. The technique's influence extends into the jet age. Early jet fighter pilots adapt fuel dumping principles to aircraft with different performance characteristics. The F-86 Sabre includes fuel dump systems designed partly for tactical use based on P-51 combat experience. Modern fighter aircraft retain fuel dump capabilities for both emergency and tactical applications. Billy Rutherford completes his combat tour in August 1944, having flown 62 missions over European targets. His final tally includes 3 confirmed aerial victories and 2 probables, modest by A standards but respectable for a pilot who began the war as an inexperienced replacement. More significantly, he is credited with developing a tactical innovation that saved dozens of American lives during its period of active use. His personal use of the fuel dump technique occurs 4 more times during his combat tour. On April 18th, he employs it to escape from 5 Me-109s over France. On May 12th, he uses a partial fuel dump to increase climb rate while pursuing a German fighter at high altitude. On June 6th, D-Day, he executes the maneuver to break up a coordinated attack against his flight near the Normandy beaches. Each time, the technique performs as expected, validating his original analysis. Billy's final combat mission takes place on August 15, 1944, during a fighter sweep over Germany. His squadron encounters no enemy aircraft, and he returns to England without incident. 3 days later, he receives orders transferring him to the Zone of Interior for reassignment as a flight instructor. His combat tour is officially complete. The transition to stateside duty proves difficult. Billy finds himself assigned to a replacement training unit in Louisiana, teaching new pilots the same basic flying skills he mastered 2 years earlier. The work is important but lacks the intensity and purpose of combat operations. He misses the technical challenges of maintaining aircraft in combat conditions and the camaraderie of squadron life. Billy's expertise in fuel dump procedures makes him a valuable instructor, but the technique's classified nature limits his ability to teach it to student pilots. Only experienced pilots destined for overseas assignment receive training in tactical fuel dumping. Billy finds himself teaching conventional flight procedures while knowing that his students will eventually need knowledge he cannot provide. After the war ends in August 1945, Billy faces the decision confronting millions of servicemen: remain in the military or return to civilian life. He chooses discharge and returns to West Virginia in September 1945. His parents welcome him home to a farm that has changed little during his 3-year absence. The same cows need milking, the same machinery needs repair, the same seasonal cycles continue regardless of global conflicts. Billy marries Sarah Bennett in June 1946. She has waited for him throughout the war, working as a nurse at Charleston General Hospital and writing letters twice weekly to wherever his squadron was stationed. Their wedding is small and quiet. Neither wants attention or celebration after years of separation and uncertainty. They settle on a small farm outside Huntington, where Billy establishes a machinery repair business. His understanding of complex mechanical systems, developed through aircraft maintenance experience, translates effectively to agricultural and industrial equipment. He specializes in engine rebuilding and hydraulic system repair, skills that prove valuable in post-war West Virginia. Billy rarely discusses his combat experience. Friends and neighbors know he flew fighters in Europe, but he deflects questions about specific missions or achievements. The fuel dump technique remains classified until 1952, when the Air Force declassifies tactical innovations from World War II. Even then, Billy mentions it only when directly asked by other veterans. In 1954, Billy receives an invitation to attend a reunion of the 357th Fighter Group in Dayton, Ohio. He drives to the event with Sarah, curious to reconnect with squadron mates he has not seen for nearly a decade. The reunion proves bittersweet. Many faces are missing, lost either during the war or in the years since. But the surviving pilots remember Billy's contribution to their tactical repertoire. Colonel Spicer, now retired and working for an aircraft manufacturer, speaks publicly about innovations developed by his group during the war. He specifically mentions the fuel dump technique and credits Billy with its discovery. The acknowledgement surprises Billy, who assumed his contribution had been forgotten amid more dramatic combat achievements. The reunion leads to an interview with an Air Force historian researching tactical developments during World War II. Billy provides detailed technical descriptions of fuel dump procedures and their combat applications. The interview becomes part of an official study on fighter innovations, ensuring that his contribution is documented in military aviation history. Billy returns to West Virginia and continues his quiet life as a machinery mechanic. He and Sarah raised 2 children, a son who becomes an engineer and a daughter who becomes a teacher. Neither child shows particular interest in aviation, though both inherit their father's analytical approach to technical problems. In 1973, Billy suffers a heart attack while rebuilding a tractor engine. He recovers, but reduces his work schedule significantly. Sarah handles the business paperwork, while Billy focuses on complex repairs that require his specialized knowledge. They live comfortably but modestly, content with the life they have built together. Billy Rutherford dies in his sleep on November 11, 1991, Veterans Day. He is 66 years old. His obituary in the Charleston Gazette mentions his service as a fighter pilot and his Distinguished Flying Cross, but provides no details about his tactical innovations. The fuel dump technique is noted only in specialized aviation publications and military histories that few civilians read. But among fighter pilots, the legacy endures. Flight training manuals continue to reference fuel dumping as an emergency and tactical procedure. Modern fighter aircraft incorporate fuel dump systems designed with both safety and combat applications in mind. The principle Billy discovered accidentally, that rapid weight reduction can provide tactical advantages, influences aircraft design and pilot training decades after his death. At the Air Force Museum in Dayton, a display case dedicated to World War II innovations includes a brief mention of tactical fuel dumping. The exhibit credits the 357th Fighter Group with developing the technique, but does not mention individual names. Billy would have approved of this anonymity. He never sought recognition for his accidental discovery, only the satisfaction of knowing it helped other pilots survive. Aviation history is written in moments of desperate innovation. When routine procedures fail and death approaches at 400 miles per hour, survival depends on thinking beyond training, beyond doctrine, beyond the accepted limitations of aircraft and human capability. Billy Rutherford's contribution to this history was born from panic, refined through analysis, and proven through repetition under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The fuel dump technique represents a particular kind of battlefield innovation, the accidental discovery that becomes systematic doctrine. Billy's initial use of the fuel dump valve was pure mistake, a panicked reach for the wrong lever in a moment when any action seemed better than inevitable death. But his methodical testing and systematic refinement transformed accident into advantage, proving that survival often rewards those who question assumptions and explore possibilities others ignore. The technique's broader significance extends beyond its immediate tactical applications. It demonstrated that even mature aircraft designs contain unexploited capabilities waiting to be discovered by pilots willing to experiment. The P-51 Mustang had been in production for 2 years before Billy recognized that its emergency fuel dump system could be weaponized for combat use. How many other innovations remained hidden in cockpits and technical manuals, waiting for the right combination of circumstances and curiosity? Modern fighter pilots inherit this legacy of tactical innovation. Contemporary aircraft incorporate fuel dump systems designed with both emergency and tactical applications in mind. The principle that rapid weight reduction can provide performance advantages influences current aircraft design and training procedures. Billy's accidental discovery echoes through decades of aviation development, reminding engineers and pilots that innovation often comes from unexpected sources. The human dimension of the story matters as much as the technical one. Billy Rutherford was not a natural-born pilot or tactical genius. He was a methodical farm kid who survived through analysis rather than instinct, who trusted systematic testing over heroic intuition. His approach to problem-solving reflected values learned from maintaining agricultural machinery rather than fighter pilot mythology. Sometimes survival depends not on superior reflexes or aggressive courage, but on the patience to understand systems and the wisdom to exploit their hidden capabilities. In the end, Billy's legacy is measured not in dramatic combat victories or technological breakthroughs, but in quiet moments of survival repeated across hundreds of engagements. Pilots who escaped impossible odds, aircraft that returned when they should have been lost, tactical situations resolved through unexpected solutions. These accumulated victories justify the effort spent developing and teaching tactical innovations. The fuel dump technique eventually became obsolete as aircraft design evolved and tactical requirements changed. But the principle it represents, that survival often requires doing what the enemy does not expect, remains constant across all forms of combat. Billy Rutherford discovered this principle accidentally and developed it systematically, leaving a legacy written not in official records or public recognition, but in the continued existence of pilots who employed his innovation when conventional tactics would have failed them. Some innovations change the world dramatically. Others save lives quietly, one pilot at a time, through techniques that become invisible parts of training and doctrine. Billy Rutherford's contribution belongs to the second category, essential but unsung, effective but unremarked, proven through repetition rather than celebrated through publicity. It is perhaps the most valuable kind of innovation, the kind that works when everything else fails, leaving its creators anonymous but its benefits enduring. The sky remembers those who understand it, even when history forgets their names. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.